Welcome back to Normal Island Live. I'm Lewis Aaron, and today I'm joined by independent journalist Barry Malone, who has previously worked at Al Jazeera and Reuters. Barry, how's it going today?
Hi, I'm well, Lewis. Thanks for having me back on. I was just looking at some of the comments, and there's a couple of people there who said they just saw me on the virus. And now I'm really paranoid. I'm going to just repeat myself and say the same things again.
I was too busy, obviously, getting ready for the show. What topics did they cover today?
Well, we did do a bit of the national security strategy from the
Mm.
US. Then there was the attempted coup in West Africa. Zach Polanski on Question Time. Yeah, a bunch of things. It was an interesting show.
Interesting. Let's see if we can make it just as interesting then. We will come back to Barry shortly. So, on today's show, we have more UKIP MEPs under Nigel Farage have been named in the Nathan Gill Russian bribery case, including a former GB News host. Let's see if you can guess who it is before we get to that part of the story. The Trump administration is seemingly backing the far right in Europe, or that's how people are interpreting it. And is Labour together planning to oust Keir Starmer? We will have to see. But just before we get into the stories, you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. Your support for us is everything. And as always, as well, my favorite part of the show is the comment section. So please leave all the comments and questions that you can. Right, let's get on to the first story. I just want to quickly add, actually, as well, which is off what I planned to say. Almost nobody has actually really covered this full story. The Guardian released this story yesterday in terms of the entire picture. There's been little drib drabs in the media about other people's involvement, but the Guardian reported the full scope of what we have and the evidence that we have about people's involvement. And since the Guardian released it, nobody else has released anything else about this story, which I just find interesting. Either it's the biased media or the distracted media or both. But let's get into the story, because more MEPs under Nigel Farage's UKIP and Brexit party, so this went across two of his parties, have been named in the investigation into Nathan Gill and his pro-Russian bribery case, which, as I said, includes a former GB News host and current Talk TV host, Alex Phillips. But we'll get to Alex's part in the story a little bit further on. So just to remind everybody, Nathan Gill, the former head of Wales for Reform UK and former UKIP MEP, pleaded guilty to his crimes and was sentenced to 10.5 years in jail for his, treason, as some people are calling it, the pro-Russian bribery. Now, I want to frame the story correctly, because I think everybody that I talk to about this story, it's kind of like, oh, he did pro-Russian bribery, but I feel like people don't really know like the ins and outs of the story. And I want to quickly say that before we, really dive into the involvement of other people, so it kind of makes more sense. So, firstly, I want to talk about the guy that was obviously involved with this. It was Oleg Voloshin. He was a Ukrainian MEP, but was pro-Russian and was the handler, the briber of Nathan Gill. He was accused of treason by the Ukrainian government for working in the interests of Russia, and this was around the time of the Russian invasion of the Ukraine when he was accused of treason. And he actually fled the country. He fled Ukraine 10 days before the Russian invasion began. Now, part of his campaign with Nathan Gill was recruiting other MEPs and officials, giving Gill speeches, talking points, and rehearsed lines, and also being involved in pro-Russian media, pro-Russian media, and obviously just Russian media in general. So the evidence that we have that is currently known is a lot of it is from Nathan Gill's phone. So some of the messages include specific talks between him and Voloshin, where they might say things like, oh, is this payment ready for this person? Or how much is this person getting paid? But because the messages are on his phone of these conversations between him and Voloshin, they don't necessarily include, or we don't know if they've got this, but it hasn't been released, of other conversations of people confirming that they did these things. And I'll explain a little bit more of that with some of the examples that we have. But we don't know if anybody else has specifically taken any money, knew that there was Russian collusion involvement or coercion involved in this, but the CPS have decided to release some more information. So here we go. So onto the names. So what's been said about these people and why they currently haven't been charged? And that's to do again with the evidence that we have of them knowingly being involved or knowingly taking money. So first we have Jonathan Bullock, Julia Reed, and Stephen Wolfe. They were MEPs. According to the Guardian article, the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, has named Jonathan Bullock, Julia Reed, and Stephen Wolfe, saying that they followed the script provided to them by Nathan Gill, by Oleg Voloshin, and when given interviews on 112 Ukraine, a pro-Russian TV channel in March 2019. And we'll talk more about 112 as well as we get on with these stories. So, just to clarify, they seemingly followed a pro-Russian script provided to them, what no questions asked. And this again ties back to the concept of this is from Nathan Gill's phone, and they've tied the evidence together that here's a script that he had. These people have said these things, but we don't have any messages on Nathan Gill's phone from either of these three MEPs where they have said, "Oh, yes, I will take money for this. Yes, I will do this for this person." It's just that we know that they followed the script. But there is no evidence that they actually took money or did this knowingly. But it would be very interesting to, maybe get a hold of their phones if they haven't already scrubbed them, or their email accounts if they haven't already scrubbed them. Now, on to the next one. So, David Coburn, he is the former leader of UKIP in Scotland. He was mentioned in WhatsApp messages between Gill and Voloshin that were released by prosecutors. This one was actually released last week. The WhatsApp messages showed Gill and Voloshin discussing how much should be set aside for Coburn. But again, it goes back to the same thing. There is no conversation that we have or that we know that the CPS or any other intelligence has where Coburn is saying or agreeing to either taking money or knowingly knowing that the Russians were involved in this. There was a discussion between Gill and Voloshin regarding the money, which the latter had given to the sorry, start that again, which the latter had given to be distributed between Gill and another MEP identified as D. And David, I'm seeing D in the morning. How much was for him? Gill messaged Voloshin, who replied 6.5 USD, as in 6.6.5 grand, we're assuming. And Coburn denied taking any payment when confronted by the BBC journalist outside his home in France. The messages were sent in April 2019 before a meeting at the European Parliament of the editorial board of 112 Ukraine. Again, coming back to 112 Ukraine, that's who the other three MEPs we previously mentioned were also involved with, whose membership included Gill and Coburn, and which was connected to I'm going to butcher this, guys, I'm sorry, Viktor Medvedchuk, Vladimir Putin's ally in Ukraine. Now, the TV station 112 was a pro-Russian Ukrainian TV station that was being subversive to the state of Ukraine and the Ukrainian government, and they were thinking about shutting it down at the time. This was after the Russian annexation of Crimea, so this is not necessarily a free speech issue, as some people framed it at the time, and some of those people were turned out to be, being paid to say these things. This is a national security issue, and the Russian handle of Voloshin was working with Gill to get UKIP MEPs to fight against this. That's what some of the scripts, some of the talking points that we have as evidence show and prove. The former head of Gill's office in Brussels, which is Ethan Wilkinson. So he wasn't an MEP. He was a candidate at one point to be an MEP for UKIP, but he worked in Nathan Gill's office, also denied to The Guardian that he received any payment after the documents released by the CPS showed Voloshin suggesting that he should be rewarded with €3,000 for his fieldwork. So again, there is no evidence that we know about where he knowingly knew there was Russian interference or whether he knew that he was taking money for anything. He has denied taking any payments. So again, there is a conversation saying how much should he be paid, which sounds like he's already done something for something, right? So he's saying that's for his field work. But again, no evidence. Next, on to Jonathan Arnott, who visited Ukraine with Gill on October 2018. During the visit, Coburn, Gill, and Arnott appeared on camera on guess which TV station? 112 Ukraine, and all made similar statements 6 weeks later during a debate in the European Parliament on the 11th of December that touched on press freedoms in Ukraine and the question of whether it should be allowed to join the EU. On to the next one. James Wells was named in the CPS notes in the context of a fresh intervention by Gill in September 2019. The notes state that Gill asked Voloshin to send him lines to take into a European Parliament subcommittee on human rights. WhatsApp messages indicate Gill had commented in the media afterwards and secured the cooperation of Wells. He denies any involvement or knowing anything. Alex Phillips, who was a Brexit Party MEP, former GB News host, and now Talk TV host, told The Guardian last month that she had voluntarily gone to speak to the police when she learned of the investigation into Gill. The CPS note states Gill had promised his handler, Voloshin, that he would get Alex Phillips to speak, although this does not appear to have happened, and Phillips has since stressed that she was open in hostility to Putin. One other thing, I don't have the exact note, so I don't want to get this wrong, but I believe that Alex Phillips was also caught up in another scandal quite a few years ago, a very famous one called Cambridge Analytica, where she admitted to have been working for them, but that wasn't related to the whole like Trump S type thing. It was related to another issue in another country that I can't remember the name of. But again, obviously, Cambridge Analytica linked to the Leave campaign, linked to potential Russian interference. Just putting that out there as a concept. It is frustrating because it seems to me, and this is just my opinion, that these people were participating in this, and the CPS have released this information, and it just seems like they just don't the smoking gun to prove any further guilt. But it does prove that they participated in these activities through Gill, with Gill, but we just don't have the evidence that is needed to prove that they did any of these things knowingly. Barry, that was the big breakdown. Hope it wasn't too long. I'm just curious, like, what do you make of all of this? Obviously, we can go with the straight up facts of what we have solidly. I've obviously added my opinion in there a little bit of like, I'm not saying that I'm trying to put guilt on these people because of my, opinions of Farage and UKIP and these people, but some of that evidence seems incredibly circumstantial and very interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah, I actually want to congratulate you on that breakdown. It wasn't too long. It was great. It was probably one of the most comprehensive breakdowns I've seen of this story. And that's also one of the things that's completely crazy to me. Like you pointed out, there was a piece in The Guardian, but this should be a way bigger story in the British media than it currently is. When you were talking, and I was listening to you break all that down, I went and opened the BBC homepage, the BBC News homepage, and there's nothing. There isn't a single story on this up there. There is a story on Leonardo DiCaprio leading the Golden Globe nominations. There is a story about Formula One, but there's nothing on this massive crisis. I think engulfing the party that is currently leading the polls, led by a man who many people expect to be the next prime minister. I think you're right in that the CPS has failed to kind of fully land the plane here. But there's a lot of information that needs to be examined and should be looked into. I actually think by journalists, by the media, they need to start investigating this. People need to respond. They need to explain themselves. I mean, this could be tremendously damaging, I think, for reform. Farage is already under pressure with all of these revelations of his bullying and rampant racism in school, which I actually think seems to have made him very uncomfortable. He's usually so smooth at riding out these crises, but he seems to be really struggling with that one. And now, on the back of that, this comes. And there's I always think there's this element to reform where there are some people who will just always vote for reform. They've decided that they're going to vote for reform, and it doesn't matter what reform does, they're going to vote for reform. It's the Trump thing, right? Where Trump said he could go out in to the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone dead, and that they would still vote for him. But in order to become the next government, reform needs to get Middle England. And they seem to have Middle England wrapped up looking at the polls right now. But something like a Russian influence operation, if this sticks, that many, many people in reform may have taken money from, effectively from Russian front operations in order to push their agenda, like, it could be hugely damaging. So I think it should be screaming from the headlines, and I think journalists should be all over it. It shouldn't just be a piece in the Guardian and you breaking it down on here. I mean, that's one of the big things that strikes me about it.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating because I think this is a very important story, as you said, and obviously there's been some good journalism with it, but it's the media attention. It really frustrates me that okay, controversial maybe, but obviously what's happening with Nigel Farage's racism scandal is very important. You know, this got reported on over 10 years ago and it's gaining momentum again. But if you had to like weigh them up in terms of like the potential consequences of these two stories, right? Russian interference, like multiple MEPs being paid off potentially. Obviously, there's no evidence that's been presented so far of any involvement with Nigel Farage, other than the circumstantial evidence of his, constant praising and defending of Putin, and some of lines that he's taken, which seems similar to some of these talking points that some of these MEPs have made, right? And I get it. There's no smoking gun. And that's what's frustrating. And obviously, I know the media can only go so far with this. I think all I can do is basically say, I hope that there are journalists in the background right now, like really trying to dig into this.
Yeah,
Because
same.
when I was researching the story earlier, I just thought I was just checking some of the names because I don't know most of these people. I've never heard of David Coburn until he was in the news last week about this scandal. And immediately, the one thing I found was UKIP's YouTube page, and it went to a clip of him on Russia Today, basically defending Russia. And it was after the annexation of Crimea. So this is 2014. And he was saying it was stupid that sanctions were getting put on like Russians and yada, 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 basically defending Russia. And I just thought I'd click on the search bar within their own page and just search the word Russia. And MPs, MEPs I've never heard of, who are in UKIP and have been in UKIP throughout the years. So many speeches of them just defending Russia constantly, over and over and over again. There is definitely so much more here to this story, but again, the media loves a smoking gun, right? It's hard for them sometimes to put out circumstantial evidence, and I get it, right? Um, there's just definitely more to this. And I'm not saying that Nigel Farage has to be guilty, but even at a minimum, this is under his leadership that potentially at least
Exactly.
one, but multiple MEPs have potentially been involved in Russian interference and bribery at this level. On top of that, as well, because nobody's really good at bringing things back up at certain points, right? Obviously, the racism scandal's hitting him now, but people forget that multiple MEPs from his party have literally gone to jail for fraud. For one of them got sentenced for like election fraud, where it was like misleading people into signing some sort of ballot. There've been multiple people in his party, candidates, officials, who have literally been outed as like neo Nazis multiple times. I do have somewhere on my phone like a notes section where every time I see one of these articles, I add it in there, and there's about 30 cases that I know of UKIP and Brexit MEPs, candidates, officials within the party who have been caught up in like extremist, not just like, oh, somebody said something a little bit racist. I'm talking about like, full on extremist neo-Nazi type of stuff. And it's like nobody's really good at bringing everything back together and add it into context, right? It's very much like we just want to focus in the now. We want to focus what's happening right now. And it gets really frustrating. But I also wanted to ask you, with the Russian interference, with Trump, right? We all know, the Russia hoax, the Russia case, everything from, what was the guy called? Robert Mueller. He managed to successfully, I would say, frame that. Obviously, a lot of people still believe there was Russian interference, but I still feel like if he can get elected again, right? If he can fire one of the guys at the top of the Justice Department during this investigation, if he can basically get this swept under the rug, he successfully batted that off and actually used it as oh, this is just my enemies trying to come after me. It's all a hoax. Do we risk that? Do you think Nigel Farage could get away with that if more information came out, if the CPS decided to release more or pursue more? Because according to the Guardian article, the investigation is actually technically still ongoing. So they
Yeah.
have evidence of things, and they're obviously looking into it. So there's something tangible there. Could he bat this off successfully as a Russia hoax Trump type scandal thing and use it to weaponize it against his enemies?
I think we're entering a pretty weird space in British politics right now, where there's a kind of a magnification, I would say, going on, where we're seeing politicians just lie blatantly.
Mhm.
Politicians have always lied, right? We know that. That's not new. But the lies now seem to be more and more outrageous. And I think there seems to be often little consequence to lying, right? Or little consequence to spinning something in a completely disingenuous way. Like, I'm old enough to remember when people resigned when they
Mhm.
were caught lying. This is not something that seems to regularly happen anymore. But I don't think we're as far down the road as they are in the US. I don't think Farage is at that stage where Trump is at, where he could get away with that. You know,
Mm.
I don't see him being able to make that convincing spin that, you know, this is all something that's coming from my enemies. This is made up. This is a hoax. I actually think that the British electorate is a little bit more sophisticated than that. I'm not saying that they're more sophisticated than the American electorate, but I think that they are less tribal right now. You know, I think that there are people in the US, like I say, they're just Republicans, they're just Trump supporters. It doesn't matter what happens. They will believe everything he says, they will believe every conspiracy theory that he puts forward. I don't think that there's a large enough percentage of the British population who are like that and who will respond to that kind of attack line from Reform or from Farage. So I think that if he goes down that line, he'll end up flailing, you know.
Mm.
And so I don't. I think he's smarter than that. So what I'm saying is, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't see any way for him to turn this to his advantage. Right? I don't think
Yeah.
he can lever this. I think it's going to be a bad thing, depending on how this develops. It's going to be a crisis that he has to manage, and I don't see a lever that makes this positive for him.
Well, I think obviously the bad thing could be is that if authorities decided to pursue this and then he got quote unquote cleared at the end of it, he could then use that as weaponization. But I just wish that somebody in politics, right? And like that could have been a moment for like even like Zach Polanski, I think, where because no one from Labour is going to be willing to say this, right? And it goes back to the idea that I always bring this up about like adding the full context into something. It's not just about attacking people in the now. If I was in Parliament, if I was the Labour Party, if I was Keir Starmer, if I was Zach Polanski, I would get up on stage and say, "This guy was bankrolled by Aaron Banks. He gave him a home, he gave him a car, he gave him a secretary during the Brexit campaign, gave the campaign up to millions of pounds, and this guy." Is accused of being married to a Russian spy. This guy, his wife, she was almost deported and had an affair with an MP, according to the Times, to stop her getting deported from the country. He has been investigated for Russian interference because he was meeting up with the Russian ambassador after Trump got elected around the Brexit period. And now he's caught up in this Russian scandal, right? Why is nobody getting up and saying that? It's almost about like the question just of now, right? Why can't somebody bring in the full story? Multiple
Yeah, it
MEPs caught
stinks.
up in a Russian scandal, bankrolled by a guy who's been accused of a Russian asset, a guy who's accused of being married to a Russian spy. Why is nobody getting up and just screaming that? Because that would get attention, right? That would get
Yeah.
attention.
For some reason, it's never stuck. Like I saw an old clip a few days ago of Matt Fry from Channel 4 News following Farage down the street and trying to sort of doorstep him on money, you know, and on him being financed by people like banks, and you know his rent being paid for a home in Chelsea, which I believe Matt Fry alleged was £13,000 a month. You know, again, there's nothing illegal there, and there's no
Mhm.
suggestion that Farage has done anything illegal. But again, when you put it all together, the whole thing stinks, and there's a pattern and there's context. And the one thing that we can confidently say about Farage right now is that he's been lying to his back teeth about this whole thing. Like, he absurdly said he didn't really know Nathan Gill when the story first broke about Nathan Gill. So it's like you say, look, there is a responsibility that he has as the man at the top, and all we've seen him do is shirk and lie and be caught out in these lies. And yeah, I think that there needs to be a more thorough investigation of all of this. Geez, we wouldn't, the Nathan Gill thing only really came back into the headlines when Zach Polanski pushed it.
Yeah, you're right.
It had been forgotten about. Nobody was reporting it. Zach Polanski talked about it, talked about it, talked about it, and then he went on Question Time and he confronted Zia Yusuf with it. And then the media kind of woke up to it and said, "Okay, let's look at this in detail." So yeah, look, it stinks to high heaven, and this is a story that people should continue to pursue. Like I say, the piece in the
Just quickly,
Guardian was
did you know there
excellent,
was a
but
Russian link as well to this new big donor? You've obviously seen the store. I was just when I was looking down at my laptop, then I was just double checking his name. You know the £9 million donation
the
they just
nine
got,
million guy, yeah.
yeah, from Christopher Harburn. There's a Russian link to that as well. It's not direct, but The cryptocurrency that he backs, that he owns I think it's like 12% share in the company. Russia has been using that cryptocurrency to divert sanctions, and that company has made more profit in I think it was 2023 or 2024 than McDonald's. Like their profit margins were up to 13 to 14 billion pounds. So you could argue, and this is what I've argued before, that the donation that Reform got from Christopher Harburn is from the profits, connected in part to Russians evading sanctions by using Tether to do international
Wow.
transactions. Just saying, just saying.
Lewis, get out there and do a big
Oh, I have
investigative piece.
tried. I have tried. Most of the videos that I do, on TikTok, social media, Instagram. Some of these videos have got attention, and some of them haven't. I posted the breakdown that I just did. I basically posted that last night when the story came out, and it got like 30,000 views. I'm happy with that, but sometimes there are stories out there where you want it to blow up, and it hasn't, and it's sad. But we've got this platform. We've got great people here listening, and hopefully the story will gain some more traction at some point. We'll see.
You're all over it. Go, you know, dig.
Oh, I'm digging. I'm going back to those UKIP videos later on the YouTube channel, which are still up. I'm going to be doing some more digging. And thank God for, I don't know what their version of Hansard is called, like the parliamentary thing that like registers everything that everybody says in every speech. I'm going to be doing some digging into that in the future. But we
By the way,
will.
Farage was also on Russia Today all the time.
Oh yeah, he was. He never
He's a regular.
confirmed because the rules at the time didn't mean you had to declare like certain incomes and I can't remember. I looked into it previously, but it was rumored that he was getting like a few £1,000s per appearance, and he appeared consistently, almost monthly. I think it was up to 17 to 20 times post Crimean annexation, I think. Which is wild. And I think that's where that famous clip was made, wasn't it? The "My mummy says you hate foreigners." I think that was on
Yeah,
Russia
yeah, I think that's Russia
Today.
Today.
It's one of the best political clips ever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Love it. No, 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 no. Anyway, we will have to move on to the next story, which is a lot more serious, actually. Maybe you can argue Russian interference or American interference, but let's jump into it. This story hadn't actually got much attention. I listened to loads of podcasts just to get a well-rounded view, but I listened to the first like 5 minutes of the Newsagents podcast today, and they started talking about this, but with the specific note which I was going to make, which is why isn't that many people talking about this? It hasn't got that much traction, which is Donald Trump and his administration has said that Europe faces a civilizational erasure. Now, this made some tractions in the headlines, but there's another part to it which didn't. He says that Europe faces civilization erasure within the next 2 decades as a result of migration and EU integration. They argue this in a policy document and a roadmap released just a few days ago. I think it was Friday. But the big highlight that has caught some people's attention, and again, I think social media got ahead of this before the mainstream media actually did. They want to cultivate resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations. That is an official document signed by Donald Trump, their national security roadmap, where they've admitted that they want to cultivate resistance within Europe's current trajectory. That has been interpreted by loads of people, many people, when you combine all their rhetoric together with they're going to be backing the far right in Europe. I will, when I come to Barry in a second, I'm going to talk about some other stuff related to like their interference already. But they are selling this as a roadmap to ensure America remains the greatest and most successful nation in human history and the home of freedom on earth. The US national security strategy makes pretty explicitly Washington's support for Europe's far-right parties. And again, that's how other people in the media are also framing it too. The document also says that Europe is in economic decline, but its real problems are even deeper, including activities of the EU that undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent, censorship of free speech, and suppression of political opposition, and the loss of national identities. Barry, So obviously, I know you spoke about this with Navarra, and I'll be interesting for you to bring in any other parts of this document because I'm specifically focusing on this bit. But from what I've read, there are some other insane parts of other interference around the world. Other things in this, I think it was like a 33-page document in total. Might be getting that wrong. Of just like other just crazy shit basically in this document. But focusing on this first, do you interpret that the way that everybody else is basically interpreting it, that they're going to interfere directly?
Yeah, it's a completely bizarre document. It's madness. You know, this is it's a national security strategy, and it's written like some kind of a white nationalist treatise. You know, somebody said earlier that you know it looks like it was written by Stephen Miller with Grok. I mean, like Grok is more articulate than whoever wrote this thing. It's bizarre, and I think that the only sort of leader who came out and pointed out how odd it was Frederick Merz, who I think said, you know, some of the stuff that's in here does not belong in here, like should not be in a national security strategy. Um, I think you're right to conclude that it explicitly says that it will support particular politics in Europe, yeah, which I believe to it means the far right, because they're worried about demographic change and like essentially when you read the sections that were there about Europe, what you come away with is a conclusion that what the US is saying is that they can only ally with majority white countries. You know, we can't ally with Europe if there's demographic change in Europe. We can't rely on a security relationship with Europe if there's demographic change in Europe. That's an incredibly extreme position for the United States to take. And you know, somebody said to me, I think somebody said on Novara earlier that um, you know, look, if the Dems come in next, then like this thing will just be torn up. But we still have 3 more years of Trump, you know, and it's also not clear that the Dems will come in after Trump. You know, I don't think it's looking like that right now. So you know, this thing needs to be taken really, really seriously. And you know, a lot of people are focusing on the fact that, which I think is super important, Europe has to think about it as an alliance. You know, the European Union needs to think about it and NATO needs to think about it. But individual European countries also need to think about this. Because is this implying, for example, that, you know, the US will give support to far right parties in the UK? You know, if they don't like the immigration policies of the UK government, you know, is that going to mean that we're going to push the more mainstream parties further to the right? They've already been drifting to the right. Are they going to go even further to the right? So I think it's a bizarre document, but I think that if we're to take it seriously, which we should, it's also kind of a dangerous document.
Yeah, I didn't actually plan on bringing this up, but I just got it up now because it just came to me. Did you know that Pete Hegseth, the guy who's obviously in charge of the U.S. military, people are, what's his new nickname? The Secretary of War Crimes is what people are calling him now, instead of Secretary of War, after they changed it from the Secretary of Defense to War, very telling. He wrote a book. He is an author. And he wrote a book a few years ago called The American Crusade. I haven't read it. I've read extracts, and I just literally got it up right now
Yeah.
on my laptop. Just for anyone who has never come across this, because this is the guy again who was in charge of a what was it $1 trillion military, who is also have been reported to be an alcoholic, an abuser, and someone who's quite unstable. He said in his book that oh sorry, I had the quote here, but the page just jumped. That the soul of America is dying. The leftist media and the machine hate President Trump, but they hate you more. America will decline and die. A national divorce will ensue. Outnumbered freedom lovers will fight back. The military and the police, both bastions of freedom loving patriots, will be forced to make a choice. It will not be good. Yes, there will be some form of civil war. And then he calls for an American crusade. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because in the next part, he does an entire section on the UK, mentions my hometown, Leeds. He says here, that radical mosques and schools are allowed to operate. Religious police control certain sections of many towns. Sharia councils dot the underground landscape. Pervasive political correctness prevents dissent against disastrous policies such as open borders and non assimilation. Hexas says the UK has been invaded by Islam. The British were invaded and they didn't know it. In one generation, absent radical policy change, the United Kingdom will neither be united nor a Western kingdom. The United Kingdom is done for. He also says London, Birmingham, Leeds, Blackburn, Sheffield, Oxford, Luton, Oldham, and Rochdale all now have Muslim mayors and they've been taken over. And then he goes on to rant about all the other European countries, right? Like, they believe this, right? This kind of goes back to the people laughed about it at the time, like Trump in his first term saying that Birmingham was like a no-go zone, right? And this is like quite popular on the far right to put out like the no-go zone type of rhetoric. But the reason I'm bringing that up again is like this is the guy. I don't feel like this has got Trump's name on it. He signed the document and he's happy to go onto it because it's Trump, right? But I don't feel like this is necessarily like his actual ideology in the sense of like this is something he's come up with. This is like it kind of screams, what's the group called who are behind the whole like Project
Oh,
2025 Heritage Foundation,
Heritage
which,
Foundation.
which is Pete Hegseth, which is, JD Vance, who famously, was it like the month after Trump got elected, did that famous speech? Was it in Germany where he was saying,
Yes.
I can't remember exactly what he was saying, but it was like Europe's been taking over. You're, locking people up for praying outside of abortion centers. And was it JD Vance who famously said that the UK might be the first country, the first Islamic country to have nuclear bombs, saying that we're going to be taken over when Pakistan have nuclear bombs, by the way. Vice President of the United States, everybody. But yeah, like this is the ideology. That's what I'm trying to paint here. Like these people who have now captured the presidency, they've captured the power, captured the seat. This is what they believe. They think it's true, or they think it could be true in the future. And now they've managed to put this into an action plan. It's not just, conservative conferences at the side. It's where it's been organized in the shadows, or it's been organized between certain groups and certain fundraisers and certain organizations. This is now the president. How fucked are we? Essentially,
You're
my question.
pretty fucked. You're spot on. You're absolutely spot on. And actually, when I was talking about them saying that they only want to ally with white majority countries, I should have put a finer point on that. I think the reality is that they don't want to ally with any country where they think that there are, how do I put this? Too many Muslims, Muslim mayors, Muslim ministers. It's about Islam. That's what it's about, I think, when they talk about demographic change. And I was aware that he had written a book, but I was not aware that it was that insane.
He's wrote two, by the way, so there is another
Oh,
book which is also
bloody hell.
controversial. Yeah,
I was aware of that, but those quotes you just read, I mean, and I know what Hegseth is, but they were still quite surprising to me in so much as that's the kind of thing that you would have heard a few years ago from an absolute crank. That is crankery of the highest order. And and now that man is the minister for defense
yeah.
in the most powerful country in the world, at the head of the world's most powerful military. It's scary. And I think that if you look at the first Trump administration, there is the sense that the first time around, he was surrounded by a lot of buffoons. But I think this time he's surrounded by some more effective, sinister individuals, right? Such as Hegseth, such as Miller. And when people were joking about whether or not that strategy was written by Miller with the use of Croc, it probably was written by Miller. I mean, it has Miller written all over it. So now you have people at the head of the US government who have serious power. You're right. I think Trump listens to them and they've carved out space for themselves. It's scary. It's really, really scary. And again, that's why I think that document has to be taken seriously. Yeah.
I just want to reiterate as well, like the things that they're accusing almost like Europe of doing, like there are certain truths in it, right? Like, but it depends on who you talk to, right? If you're perhaps not even just necessarily on the left, right? Because being pro-Palestinian is not necessarily just something of the left, right? Lots of people are pro-Palestinian, but banning Palestine action, right? Like that is the people on the right who talk about free speech and all of this and yada yada yada. They don't care about that, right? The government literally, banning this organization and banning support of it. They don't care about that. It's just their version of speech, which is obviously being
Yeah,
suppressed. But
exactly.
bringing it back to the U.S. government, like everything that they're essentially accusing us of, right? They've been doing, right? Rounding up students. They've been banning members of the press. They have been, subverting their power through their institutions to influence deals, influence the media. Obviously, everything from Jimmy Kimmel to, people still speculate about Stephen Colbert being cancelled and whether they had some hand in that. We have, and again, I listened to a podcast the other day with. It was on the Daily. I cannot remember this guy's name, but he is basically a free speech absolutist, but not necessarily in the crazy way when you think about that. Like he is consistent. He will defend a neo-Nazi in America, which people can argue about. That's bad, yes, but he'll also defend somebody who's absolutely on the far left. He's defended terrorists and protected their free speech. And the one thing, and I have to stress this too, because I always bring this back up. The scariest thing that I think Trump has done, and it's barely spoken about, is like his pressure on law firms. He specifically sanctioned or threatened to sanction law firms who have previously worked on cases that went after him, previously sanctioned lawyers who worked on those cases. And then, in response to him threatening to sanction them, they gave him like hundreds of millions of dollars of free legal advice. He threatened to take away their security clearances because some law firms require security clearance to work on certain
Yeah.
cases. And if they got them taken away, it could essentially, shut down their law firm. And that direct kind of power that he is using over those administrations, it's like the call is coming from inside the house. It's everything they're accusing of us, which I think exists in little pockets to a certain extent, but they're doing it to the full extent. And I think, do you think that's like an overt part of the strategy? It's almost like if I'm saying you're doing it, you can't say I'm doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not about free speech. Right? We know that. It's not about free speech. They weaponize that concept. It's about quashing dissent. It's about silencing the ideas that you want silenced, and it's completely hypocritical. If you want to talk about freedom of expression, the worst thing that's happened in this country recently is the prescription of Palestine action. That is the most egregious abuse of legislative power to quash dissent in this country in modern history, right? We have pensioners being arrested for holding up signs. We're in an absurd position right now with this, and they don't care about that. They're not interested in that. Look, that's obvious. We had a few days ago, I believe she's an undersecretary of states in the State Department who was on a visit to Europe. I can't remember. Maybe she was in Germany or something. I can't quite remember. But she put out a video on social media where she said, "I'm in Europe where free speech is under attack, does not exist anymore, and I'm going to use my diplomatic passport to say some things that Europeans are not allowed to say." And then she just spouted a lot of sort of right wing talking points, insulted Islam. But of course, the one big thing that she didn't mention that people are being arrested for supporting is Palestine. She didn't talk
Mm.
about that at all. So look, it's not about freedom of expression. It's a bold attempt to quash dissent. That's what it is. And the scary thing about that document and about those quotes that you read out is we're looking in effect at a white nationalist project.
It seems
That's what
so.
that's what Stephen Miller has always been about. If you go back and you look at Stephen Miller's even his pre sort of national politics career, this guy was always a white nationalist. So what we're seeing, and some people probably think this is hysterical. I really don't. What we're seeing is the most powerful country in the world uh, enacting white or threading white nationalism through its foreign policy and its security strategy, um, which is it's crazy.
Yeah, and a lot of those kind of networks already exist, right? We already have obviously Russian interference, and I can't remember who I was listening to. It might have been what was Trump's old Russia security advisor called, the English woman, Fiona Hill. And she was talking about in an interview a few months ago about how Russia previously, when they started their disinformation campaigns like online and social media, it was about trying to create things, and they weren't that successful. Like when they tried to interfere in the Scottish referendum, they weren't that successful because they weren't very good at it then. But what they realized is like you don't have to make things up; you just have to exacerbate things that already are out there, or take advantage of
Yeah.
situations like
Mhm.
Southport, right? Yeah, Southport happened, and then they can just put out. I'm not saying they did, but there was obviously suspicion at the time that Russian accounts were exacerbating the notion that this guy was an asylum seeker who killed these three children, right? So it's about just adding fuel to the fire, and those networks already exist. There's suspicions that obviously states like Israel and pro-Israel individuals and organizations support certain groups. We know that Tommy Robinson has a massively pro-Israel American, I can't remember if it's a billionaire back, I cannot remember this guy's name, but he is specifically tied to a network which ties back to like Steve Bannon. And weirdly enough, in the new Epstein files, ties back to Epstein as well, of people wanting to support certain people in certain countries who are doing certain things. So the networks for it already exist, right? They don't have to necessarily build any foundations for this, right? They already have them. They exist, and the people who are
Robinson's been, sorry to interrupt you,
no,
Lewis,
go
but
ahead.
Robinson has been benefiting from connections in the US
Mhm.
for many, many years now. And I think there has been convincing reporting that he has been supported financially from interest in the US to some extent as well, and that there has been a serious effort to build those connections between elements of the far right in the US, elements of the far right in the UK. I'm Irish, though I haven't lived there for a long time, and that has also been happening with the nascent far right in Ireland, where they've been forging connections with the far right in the UK, with the far right in the US. We have connections with the far right in Germany. And, there
Mhm.
is a powerful far right movement in Germany, which is very scary in terms of the level of sort of um, struggling for the word, but they've sort of infiltrated,
Mm.
lots of, there's been evidence of infiltration into the German military, for example, right? So yes, you're right. Those networks already exist, and now we have someone like Steve Miller, a white nationalist, and now an incredibly powerful man who can
Mhm.
exploit those networks like they've never been exploited before. And so, what we're looking at, and I don't think we've seen this before, is this connected global far right movement, and like the thought that the most powerful government in the world is now part of that effort is, again, I just keep saying the same thing. It's just something that, you know other governments, people on the left, need to take really, really seriously. Like, this thing shouldn't be dismissed. Like, I've seen some people today taking the piss out of the document. You know, sure. I mean, okay, but no, this is serious.
And one thing that's I find interesting, when I've looked into fascism and fascism in the past, the one thing that I read into when I was reading up on the British Fascist Party and Oswald Mosley is the question I wanted answered is why didn't it work? Why weren't they successful when they were successful in other parts of Europe? And it's not
Mm,
just because we're English and we don't want fascism. It's apparently historians put it on one thing. Like it basically came too late that there was enough traction of fascism around Europe at the time that our leaders at the time were able to say, look over there. Look what's happening, and this is still again. This is pre, concentration camps in Germany. We're talking about like early 30s, mid 30s. Like fascism had its grip in certain countries, and they could point and be like, "Look how badly things are. Look what's happening to these people. Look what's happening over there." The difference is now nobody's willing to do that because it's Trump. Starmer does not get up and say
yeah.
the things that he's doing are bad. None of the leaders do. They tiptoe around him. They bring him gifts. Or if you're FIFA, who have just been reported to the ICC apparently for aiding Israel in some way. I haven't read the article. I just saw the headline. I want to be transparent. Gave Donald Trump a made-up peace award the other day. Right? Everyone is kissing this guy's ass, and I get it actually. Politics, right? To a certain extent, you have to kiss people's asses, but we're at a point where you've got white nationalism rising, we've got extremists rising, we've got this document, and apparently, according to the historians, one of the most powerful tools in the past to fight against this was everybody saying, "Look how bad things are going there." When you've got like people in America getting dragged into bans by masked people who are apparently ICE agents, and it has now been proven that other people are now kidnapping people in America, and people just think they're ICE agents when they're not. People are being trafficked this way. You've got people getting snatched off the street. You've got genuine photos of like children being zip tied by ICE agents, right? You've got just a few weeks ago, there was the woman who was dragged out of her nursery
Yeah.
while she was taking care of children in her care,
Yeah.
dragged out because they thought she was an illegal alien, right? And right now, all of our leaders should be saying, we don't want that. That's what's going to happen here. But they won't because it's Trump. So
I didn't know any of that about Mosley, and that theory. That's super, super interesting. Recommend me the book that you read. Um, but yeah, I was saying to somebody recently, I have never seen a situation where world leaders are so prostrated in front of another world leader. I've never seen this with any other president. I mean, it's humiliating for all concerned and shows the level of fear that Donald Trump has sort of struck into other countries because he's so unpredictable and they don't know what he might do, whether it's some insane response to do with tariffs or trade. He's just that bloody unpredictable. And that's what, like I said earlier, that Merce did come out and kind of say, I don't think this stuff should be in a national security strategy. But nobody else said anything. Nobody else said anything.
mm,
And what we'll probably get is some talk about Ukraine and how there's a difference of opinion and the US needs to talk to the European states about Ukraine's strategy. That's what people will focus on from this document. But they'll be frightened to talk about anything else. And what we saw a lot of former leaders come out and slam this today. But out of the current leaders, the only one who said anything was Merce, and what Merce said was, you know, even pretty measured. So you have this strategy that essentially says we're orienting away from you. We may support resistance in your countries. There's civilizational decline or whatever it was, and European leaders stay mute.
I could talk about this for hours. I really could. It's obviously scary times, but we do need to move on to the last story, which is a quick one. But first, we rely obviously on small donations. So, if you've liked today's show, which I think has been a good one so far, we want to be, a bigger media organization. We want to, destroy the oligarchs and take on just everybody else who's not really telling the full story. You can head to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. And also you can become a YouTube member for 99p. So I hope you've liked today's show. So quickly, just with the last story, I've left it open to how much I'll talk about this, just so we know that I like to go over on the show. But the Times has reported that Labour Together are fielding candidates with local Labour Party teams. Now, basically, the story goes that they were asked who would be like the best chance of winning leader. They specifically said the best chance of leading Labour into an electoral victory at the next general election compared with Starmer, and to rank them against those that they would be likely to vote for in a leadership. So again, this is, Labour Together, the organization which apparently, according to multiple books, multiple reporting, ousted Jeremy Corbyn, helped manufacture or exacerbate the anti-Semitism scandal, put Keir Starmer in power. The same group are apparently fielding these candidates and asking members who they would prefer. But in total, 8 senior Labour politicians were named alongside Starmer. The 5 cabinet ministers in the survey are Wes Streeting, obviously the Health Secretary, Shabana Mood, the Home Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, Ed Miliband, obviously former leader, who is now the Energy Secretary, and Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. But Labour Together also listed Angela Rayner, Andy Burnham, and also Lucy Powell on this list. Now, we don't have access to like the data that they gathered. Labour Together specifically said that They were just doing this to gather more data and compare it to some of the polling that they have. But again, this is the same organization who at the time was headed by Morgan McSweeney, who in multiple books, so much reporting over the years, including Al Jazeera as well, who did a small documentary on this actually, who ousted Jeremy Corbyn. They thought that the Labour Party would never win under a leader so far to the left. Morgan McSweeney helped oust him by various means and various tactics, put Keir Starmer in power. Keir Starmer, and this is well reported as well, wasn't like part of the plan. He was just a pawn in the plan. They chose him, and he wasn't like, one of these people maneuvering to make this happen, although obviously he's gone along with it. And now obviously trying to replace Starmer, if you believe the reporting and interpret it in the way a lot of people have. Barry, am I just, being the political pundit who's, trying to spice things up and trying to twist it in a way that I want to see it? Or do you think it's fair to say that why else would they ask, the members this question other than they're wanting to know who they can get across the line to replace Starmer?
This is so boring. Like, not you doing this story, but this list of people that they've come up with. I don't think you're being conspiratorial. Look, we know how influential Labour Together is, and like you said, there's been amazing reporting, including this recent book that's come out. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the author, and I haven't read it yet. But there's this book on Labour Together and on Morgan McSweeney and on the influence that they have, which shows, right, that they're incredibly influential. And yes, they had a key role in ousting Corbyn and coming up with the sort of anti-Semitism fiction and installing Starmer. Oh, that's a bit of an extreme word, but backing Starmer. But when you look at the list of people who they're putting forward, you might look at Andy Burnham and think, well, that's quite surprising because I'm sure Labour Together, but maybe they're just testing the waters there to see what kind of support he has. But if you look at some of the other ones, you could imagine that Labour Together might want to come in and replace Starmer. I mean, if I was Reform or if I was Zach Polanski, I would not be worried about any of those people, any of them. Like they're not going to save the Labour Party. Yeah, the only one. Like that's what I'm saying. He's the only one who I think has any chance of saving Labour's sort of electoral chances from that list. Um, but I don't think Labour Together would want to put Andy Burnham in, given what we know about Labour Together. But there's nobody else on that list who would worry me at all. No one. Again, I keep coming back to this thing. Labour are in an incredibly difficult position because they're attacked from the right and they're attacked from the left. So strategically, that's really hard for a party. But no one on that list is going to save them, except perhaps Andy Burnham. But I don't think that Labour Together will be interested in installing him, I guess is what I'm saying.
But they have created this mess, right? And it's not just a case. I'm not going to go through all their failures and their bad political moves, but in terms of internal party, right? To get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, they didn't just want to pluck him up. They wanted to take out all the roots, right? They've purged or completely subdued the left in the party. People are
Mhm.
saying that the new budget was to make the left of the party happy, yada yada yada. But in terms of the old figures, right? Like no one on the left of the party has got any jobs in the government anymore. People say like Lucy Powell's probably the most left-leaning person now. It was reported that Sadie Louise Hay was potentially ousted and leaked on by Morgan McSweeney because she was the most left-leaning person in the cabinet, with the exception of Rayner. And essentially, they've purged the left of the party, right? And to do that, they've made the party so right-wing within the context of Labour that they have no one else appealing left. Essentially,
Yeah,
the party is boring now. And again, I'm not just saying that as
it's
a person who
boring.
loves consuming political
It's
stuff,
so
but
boring.
have you seen Rachel Reeves on TV? Have you seen her on TV or any of them? None of them are good.
But it's not even like that's you're spot on. But like also, what are they for? What are they for? What do they stand for? You know,
Mm.
like it goes beyond whether they're polished media performers or not. Like that's the sort of the tedious thing that all the commentators said about Wes Streeting. You know, he's so good on TV. Oh
It's
my,
all
look,
right.
he makes. No, well, I agree with that. I don't think he's amazing, but you know, he goes on Sky News and he makes a couple of jokes,
Mm.
and the sort of commentariat fall over themselves with praise. But like it's beyond whether he's polished or not. What does he stand for? What do they stand for? What are they
Yeah.
for? What's the
Ex-
point of Labour right now? Because they certainly
Exactly.
can't seem to articulate it.
And all of them are now attached to the baggage of Starmer. But again, let's. I'll criticize the entire general public for a second. Feel free to come after me. When the Tories got kicked out, right? Everyone, not everyone, that's unfair. A big portion of the country is just like, okay, everything is Labour's fault now. And that's kind of how it works, right? People have almost, when I say people, I mean like a big chunk of people have almost like forgotten like 14 years of Tory austerity. And I don't want to like lessen that for the people who it has specifically impacted, but that is the short termness of politics. Like, it is technically, in theory, possible that if a new leader came in, I'm not saying who, and really gave it a fresh start, I feel like they could recover. I'm not saying that as a person who wants to back them. I'm just saying that from like a political opinion, because again, people forget so quickly. But I just don't feel like they've got any candidates who could really do that. Maybe again
Yeah.
with Burnham, but I have a feeling with Burnham that because he was good Burnham has rose through the opposition of during COVID, right? That was kind of his kind of like way bigger national rise as the person who was popular on multiple sides, that he was opposing the government throughout COVID, right? He was doing these daily press briefings and he rose up there, and he's good in opposition to Labour, even being in the Labour Party. But
Mm.
I just have a feeling that he might just fall flat as leader. Like everyone would be like, right, we're getting in Andy. He's going to become leader. We're going to get him an MP seat. We're going to maneuver it so he becomes leader, and it just falls flat. I don't know. I don't know. I think just because none of them inspire me. None of them all. And
Like, I'm not saying that
yeah, go
Burnham
ahead.
is going to
Sorry.
save the day. Sorry, Lewis. I'm not saying that Burnham is going to save the day, just to be clear. I'm only saying he's probably the best chance.
Yeah, no, I think he would be. Maybe Wes could maneuver it, like if he got some better advisors, maybe, because I feel like he's got the potential just because of that. He does have that. He probably has the most charisma, but that doesn't mean he's got a lot of charisma because they're all a bit flat. But yeah, anyway, we'll go to the comments now. I just wanted to add in that little story, so I just think it was interesting because I get a chance to bring up how Labour have basically shot themselves in the foot. Hello, producer.
Hello.
It's Sarah.
Hello. It is
How's it
I.
going?
Yeah, good. Oh my God, what a great show. I just feel so subpar sitting in the room with Lewis and Barry because I was learning so much from the both of you. I was like, I actually don't know fuck all. You guys are so
Shut up. You're
intelligent.
lying. You're being
No,
modest. Come
no,
on
no
now.
lies are told. But it's a great Monday because I'm learning so much from you guys. So, hello everyone. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So let's
Yes.
go to super chat really quickly because there were so many wonderful super chats. Thank you so much, Mike. Oh, sorry, I actually forgot how to do my job. Thank you so. Oh, this is new. This is new. These effects. I've not seen this. Thank you so much, Michael, for gifting 2 10 left memberships. Super grateful.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Becca, for also giving 5 10 left memberships. Love you.
Always love
Um,
Becca.
yeah, always love Becca and Michael.
She's a regular.
She is a regular. Thank you so much, Ride Feather, for becoming a member and then also gifting 5 10 left memberships. Right, now to the interesting comments. I can't
Ooh.
wait. No, there's actually one comment I'm really excited to kind of unpack. But one that really made me laugh a lot, actually. Lewis has tasked up his bathroom. Um, so sorry, guys. The Russia story is super important. But Lewis is podcasting from the loo. Lewis is filming from the pantry.
No,
Um,
I know why they're saying that, and that's because previously on, oh my god, I'm literally blanking because I'm caffeine deprived.
it's
What
8:41. Don't have any caffeine at this point.
the thingy? One of our previous guests made a joke that this looked like bathroom tiles, and I'm literally blanking on names because I'm just so tired today. Um, and that, yeah, someone said these are not bathroom these are actually acoustic tiles. Thank you very much. Supposed to help with my microphone quality. I'm thinking about
Oh.
painting them because I've gone back to my bathroom tile look as opposed to my orange wall look. Okay, guys. Just,
Yeah,
I
funny.
even decorated here.
Yeah,
It sounds amazing.
it
Your sound
does.
is so crisp with so the
Really
panels are
crisp.
working.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um,
Someone appreciates my tiles.
Also, there was a few comments just about you, Barry, as well. That Lewis and Barry are delivering a blisteringly good show tonight. Blisteringly good show tonight.
Good
And
word.
lots of comments about
Thank
you,
you,
Barry, and
Edward.
how amazing you are. Um, right. Let's unpack this one first. I will go through comments quite quickly, but there are some highlights. This one I feel like we can talk about. So what? From Paul Smith. So what if they have ties to Russia? Turn Left has serious Russia-phobia problem. Today isn't the Soviet Union and the Cold War is over if you haven't noticed.
Barry, you've worked in obviously international affairs and other stuff for years. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, look, it's not about having ties to Russia. And I would fully accept that, like, Russophobia is a thing, and we have a problem, I think, in international Western media coverage, where a country like Russia is painted as somehow uniquely malign, right? And countries that are, I guess, official enemies of Western nations, such as the UK and such as the US, where most of our big so-called international news organizations come from, the official enemies of those countries tend to be painted as uniquely malign. And listen, Russia does act in a malign way in the world, but so does the US, and so does the UK, and so
Yep.
does China, and so does everybody, right? Everybody is out there um, um, fighting for their best interests, and sometimes doing it in very subversive ways. But it's not about, to be honest, it's not even about whether they appeared on Russia Today, or whether they have links with Russia. It's about the accusation that they may have been paid money to advocate for Russia while being elected representatives. I mean, that's the issue, right? And that's a problem. Um,
I was going to jump in from the.
so it's so
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
saying,
go ahead,
so
Barry.
it's not Russophobia. It's not Russophobia.
Yeah, like I completely agree with Barry. I'm not going to speak on behalf of everyone from Turn Left. However, I do feel like they would agree with this, which is, and again, it's not that Russia's the bad guy. It's that we are all the bad guys, right? That they're a bad guy who wants to see our downfall. It's not just a case of like Russia and the UK and the Western allies have different interests. Like their interests and our interests as well is to see each other fall and collapse. And that's the unfortunate thing that we have within this. We go out there in the world, the UK, we do very bad things along with the US, and pretty much every other country in the world has something going on, and we can argue about who's the worst. However, Russia is actively doing sabotage across the UK, across Europe. They've done everything, obviously, from Novichok to all these terrible things. I'm sure we have done bad things too, but ultimately, they are in opposition to us. And anybody working on their interests on behalf of them, potentially being paid by them, being interfered by them, should be something. Because again, it's not just the fact of we've got different interests. Their interest is our downfall. And Russia do have a special place in their heart for hating the UK a little bit more than some other countries as well because of some history. But yeah, it's working for somebody
Mm,
who hates us. But again, we are all bad guys. I completely agree with Barry with that.
yeah,
I don't think it's
agreed.
Russophobia. I think that we'd be doing this for any other country who would be Russia-like. The same way
Mm,
we're shitting all over the US, the same way I would shit over China, Israel, or anyone else who's doing bad shit in the world. But
yeah,
yeah,
We did
100%.
shit on the US, didn't we? I think we were sort of equal opportunity shitters.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, we shit on everyone equally.
I feel embarrassed, like sometimes going to certain other countries. Like I think when I went to Malaysia, I genuinely didn't know the history. Like I was like, "Oh, you drive on the same side of the road as us." I said that before thinking, and they was like, "You colonized us," and I was like, "Fuck." And,
My
I say
God,
that
that is
half
funny.
jokingly because it is ridiculous. Because I don't think any amount of even school education could educate an average British person on how many places we've been to in the world because of all the bad things that we've done, not just in like the colonial history, but like even more like recent history, like coups and backing other things. And we're all the bad guys. It's as simple
Mm,
as that.
yeah, it's true. Um, and Becca says all this pro-Russian propaganda and propagandists makes me very nervous. Putin's Russia is extremely dangerous and threatening. And it's hard not to foreground history with this, or like look back on history. I think particularly with Russia, and we can look at our own misdemeanors as well. But I think of, this is probably so dramatic, but Molotov, and how that they were bombing Finland, and then he would spread the idea that they were actually dropping food to them, and that's, I kind of like equate it to that. I just feel like no one is too smart to fall for propaganda. And when I think about the likes of Molotov, or like the Pravda, and like this propaganda machine that Stalin had, not to liken Putin to Stalin, but I can't help but think about dictators in the past, and how they push forms of propaganda to make it seem as though that they are noble. But so, what do you guys think?
Um, it's difficult when it comes to. I lost my thought. Sorry, it's gone. Barry, did you have anything
Yeah,
on that?
yeah. I mean, look, yeah, you're right. No, I think that the thing that leapt out at me, what you said was, no one's too smart to fall for propaganda.
Mm,
And, I think we're getting to a stage now in the world where, we're entering an even more dangerous phase, because of the use of, stuff like generative AI, which I find terrifying. I find that terrifying. Like there's a part of me that thinks that generative AI should be banned. It should certainly, at a minimum, be banned for use by political parties. But the regulatory sort of framework is not there yet, while we're moving at breakneck speed into adopting this technology, sometimes for political ends. But in terms of propaganda, again, look, everyone's engaging in it, and everyone is engaging in interference. I think the Russians are very good at it.
Mm,
And I think that the Russians have always been good at statecraft. They always have. And they have often outmaneuvered Western countries. Whether that was
mm,
during the Cold War, whether that's post Cold War, that's recently, they've always been very bloody good at it. And they remain good at it. With, at the end of the day, Vladimir Putin invaded illegally a sovereign nation,
yeah.
and that is, again, that is the government that we're dealing with. And I don't think it's being Russophobic to say that. And again, the issue with the allegations against the politicians, again, is that they're elected representatives acting on behalf of another government. And
Mm,
again, that's not me even saying that the problem, although it is a problem, is that they're acting as like so-called foreign agents. It's
mm,
just that they would take money from anyone, to say something that they don't necessarily believe. Whether that's a government, whether that's a corporation, whether that's Elon Musk, whether that, that that's the problem.
mm,
So I
mm.
agree with Sarah. We're, in terms of propaganda, we're living in bloody dangerous times.
we are.
I don't want to compare like who's the worst and who's better and who's the good guy. I don't want to do that, but I can't think of any like stories in modern history, at least. I want to say modern, I mean like very modern, like now, like this century, or even just before the turn of the century, the millennia, of where I've seen a story where it's like Russia arrests English spy for trying to set fire to a train type situation. Maybe I'm just in an insulated media environment and we don't hear about these stories, but we know, I think it was AP News, and this was up until like a year ago, so there's been more since then, where they literally tracked like every government's accusation and evidence of like this warehouse getting set on fire, or this thing happening, or this cable being cut was like Russian, right? And it's like dozens and dozens just in the space of a year. Like, do we do this anywhere? Like, is there like, I know we might back a militia somewhere, we might provide weapons which go into the market and then end up with that person. Do we have we been caught recently doing anything direct like that, or is that just like that's Russia's game? I'm picking your
I,
brain here. If and I don't expect you to
No,
have an opinion on this. I'm just
in
curious if you know any of these stories.
no, but like in terms of the actions of MI6 or CIA or any other intelligence agencies, I think I hear what you're saying, but I don't think it's necessarily useful to kind of like pick individual incidents, because
Mm,
the more important thing, as I think you've essentially touched on, is backing armed groups in certain parts of the world, is interfering clandestinely. And listen, ultimately, if we want to look at the West, if we want to look at the country in which we're sitting, our governments and intelligence apparatus has been for the past 2 years backing a genocide. So I don't want to sit
Not just
here
one,
and
two now.
yeah. Look, I guess you're talking about Sudan, and yes, we know that British weapons
Yeah.
have been sold to the UAE and then
Oh,
have
but yeah,
turned up on
Israel's
the
way more
battlefield in
direct, obviously,
Sudan,
as
right?
well.
Where there is actually ethnic cleansing going on in El Fasher, yes, but then we have also been giving material and diplomatic cover to one of the worst genocides in modern times. So I'm not going to sit here and point the finger about individual
Yeah.
incidents. You know what I mean?
It's almost like I want to run with the story that everybody's the bad guy, which is true. But it's almost like that. I think that's that natural kind of thing you have inside of you to want to, pick on the people who are genuinely your actual like enemies as well at the same time, but while still balancing the fact of we're all the bad guys.
But if
Um,
that was the case, Lewis, then I should be slamming you guys, given I'm Irish. I should be on here giving you a hard
I've got an
time.
Irish nana. I've got an Irish
I've got an
nana.
Irish
I'm
nana.
technically only a quarter English. Technically a quarter English. But yeah. Well,
Yeah,
now I'm not even going to go into like who's the worst bad guy in the last few hundred years
it's
because
difficult.
we've probably come first.
Yeah.
And we still don't teach about what we did in Ireland, but hey ho,
No,
maybe
we
in the
don't.
future we'll get there.
Maybe. But just to finalize, this was quite nice. Curtis was right. It's definitely a banger of a show with Barry.
Well, thanks,
Oh,
Emma.
that's really lovely, isn't it? And
That's so
then
nice.
we're just gonna do just one more nice comment, just because I feel like Monday needs more light. Thank goodness for Turn Left. The Turn Left keeping the pressure on these people. Yay! Well done, Turn Left. That is not me, it's all them. I've taken quite a bit of time off, but oh well. I'm just gonna say thanks for a great show and leave
Thank
the
you.
comments there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Lewis. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to all the commenters. It was super fun.
Barry, I'll leave it on a nice note. It's Christmas, right? I'm not actually sure. I won't ask, but I'm not sure exactly where you are based specifically. But this weekend, there is a wonderful Christmas event happening in London. It's called Putting the Christ Back into Christmas, and it's hosted by none other than Tommy Robinson. The Church of England have said that this is going to just be another political event, and they're trying to weaponize the name of Christ. Will you be going? Sounds very festive.
I am in London, but I no, I won't. That will not be the Christmas event that I will be going to. I will be having lots of Christmas drinks over the next couple of weeks, but I will not be going to that. The only thing I have to say that is, I saw somebody say, like utter yank nonsense, and that's what I agree with. Again, it's like this bizarre yank. That sounds terrible saying magnification of British politics. Jesus Christ, do they have any original ideas?
You know what? I'll come back to the Christmas thing in a second. I'm gonna make a prediction. And I don't actually do predictions. I can speculate, but actual prediction. I wouldn't be surprised if Tommy Robinson's in the White House at one point before the end of Trump's term. Genuinely.
Good
Would not
person.
surprise me with this new plan. But if you want to go to his Christmas event, if anybody in the audience wants to go to his Christmas event, if you go onto his profile on X, there is a lovely link there where you can donate. But it's Christmas time, right? Who are you donating to if you click on the link? Is it some food bank? Is it some sort of cause? Is it helping any group of people? No. If you click the link to his fundraiser, it goes directly to his company to support his independent journalism this Christmas, putting the Christ back into
Journalism.
Christmas. Sorry, I did a video about this yesterday. It's just thought I'd end on a Christmassy note. But again, thank you so much, Barry. We've had so much amazing feedback today. So thank you for joining us again. And hopefully we'll have you back probably in the new year, hopefully, to see what interesting stories are just around the corner. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today. The next show will be on Wednesday. We will see what's happening in the world and see what other crazy things come out. Maybe, I don't know, Donald Trump will back the AFD. Maybe there'll be a coup in a European country somewhere. Who knows? We will have to see. But we will see you all on Wednesday. Thank you so much for a great show, great comments, and goodbye, everybody.